Okay, so I have to do a video to balance out a major memo that was issued by the Republican Study Committee months ago, but it's still in effect today. And also, we have to discuss something that's in the works that Mitch McConnell has set in motion to try to bleed Biden in and the Senate Democrats into submission that I hope Democrats don't take the bait on. What I'm talking about now, first off, is obviously the 3.5 reconciliation, or excuse me, the $3.5 trillion reconciliation bill, plus also the 1.2 infrastructure bill. Okay, what's going to happen in a couple days is the debt ceiling limit is going to be reinstated. That puts a mandated federal cap on how much or even the ability to borrow from our own banks to pay for government services across the board. You know, farmers, Social Security, veterans, COVID debt, Trump debt, just anything. And currently, the federal government cash resources is less than $1 trillion. So even if Biden didn't spend the 3.5 trillion, the debt ceiling would need to be reinstated anyways just to make ends meet. But because Mitch McConnell and other stupid Republicans think the federal government should be run like a business, which, let's be honest, people, the federal government is not a business. It provides too many programs where you can't look at it as a profit loss margin thing. The government, we are the United States invented Wall Street. We have the ability to control and regulate Wall Street. We own the tax system. We control the money. We don't need to really put much legal focus on how much we can borrow, as long as we have the ability to pay it back. And not paying it back, like in 2011, can have serious debt consequences in the long term. Because sure, yeah, our own banks might still lend us more money, or we might have to go abroad again, but we're going to be paying more interest rates to borrow again if it's ever reinstated and if our own credit rating is downgraded. Like, for example, if your credit score is below 600, you're going to be paying hefty interest rates, and that's the same exact policy with the federal government. The federal government does have its own credit rating, believe it or not. And so the federal government relies on Congress to give it the authority to pay its own bills. And Mitch McConnell, ever since he got into power, has used this to basically force Democrats into submission when he wants to, like he did with Barack Obama, with the government standoff, and also, the fiscal cliff, just all this bullshit. And so since Democrats are now in complete control technically, and this and what they did last time when the Republicans were still in majority and Trump was in president, and this issue came up, they just flat suspended it for 2 years, no questions asked. They paid for Trump's tax cuts, they paid for COVID, no questions asked, and you know so now that Biden and it's now a complete Democratic majority is up, no 10 senators are going to cross the aisle to reinstate the debt ceiling so that the government can pay its bills because of Mitch McConnell's stupid orders. Thanks, Mitch. So what needs to happen now is that in the Democrats' reconciliation proposal, they need to put this stipulation in so that it could pay for its own bills, not even including the 1.2 trillion or the 3.5 trillion. So it has to put into the 3.5 trillion because the Republicans won't let it even be put into the 1.2 trillion either. So the Democrats have to go at it alone, and also the Republican Study Committee don't listen to the inflation bullshit when it comes to the 3.5 trillion. Top economists have all agreed that the 3.5 trillion at minimum is needed so that we can actually move forward properly into the 21st century and maybe have a chance of actually competing in the long term and not being a second or third rate country long term. So the inflation nonsense, it's just Republican Study Committee bullshit because they released this memo in March or April, was it, that's saying that the only way that they can scare their voters and even Democratic voters by every time Biden introduced a spending plan is to go inflation, 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 inflation. Just because consumer prices are up a little bit because people have a little bit more money in their pocket thanks to stimulus programs and credit and child tax rebates. People have some money, so, naturally corporations are getting a little greedy. But these lawmakers don't even understand how the inflation formula works. So just don't believe it. And also keep pressure on your Congress and also your senators, because there's still some scared Congress people and even some still scared just scared Democrats. Pull the trigger. Spend the spend the 3.5 trillion. You're Democrats. You're supposed to be tax the wealthy and spend on social safety programs to help the poorest Americans. Reminder, Democrats, this is what you're supposed to stand for. You're not supposed to protect the rich. Thank you.